Americans will elect their next president on the 5th of November this year. It's going to be a rematch of the 2020 US presidential elections. It's Trump versus Biden once more. In fact, it's the first US election rematch in almost 70 years. And Donald Trump could make history if he wins it. He could be the first US president in 127 years to win non-consecutive terms. Joining me to discuss this are Ambassador Yogesh Gupta and my colleague Neha Khanna and Irina Sukerman, who joins us from New York. Welcome to the News9 Plus show. Neha, ab ki baar Trump sarkar?
Well, if you ask Trump supporters, they will
Yeah.
say, of course, that's the way it's going to be. You know, firstly, let me tell you, Sandeep, that for a vast majority of
Yeah.
Americans, polls show this is actually a nightmare.
It's a nightmare.
You know, they just did not want to see a Trump-Biden rematch. They
Right.
believe they're between a rock and a hard place.
Yes.
Very little to choose between the two.
Right.
If I could quickly outline what I think are the
Yes.
biggest challenges that the two leaders face going into this election. Talking about Biden, well, his age is a huge factor.
Yeah.
His apparent frailty, forgetfulness, his gaffes, which Trump supporters do not fail to remind the people about.
Yeah.
There is a lot of anger over his unpopular immigration policies,
Yes.
again something that Trump has gone out of his way to capitalize on. And of late, there's also been a lot of anger, especially amongst the Arab Americans, over Biden's unflinching support to Israel's war in Gaza.
Yes.
Those are some of the biggest challenges that Biden faces going into this election.
Right.
You know, Biden would have liked to believe that he's handled the economy well.
Yes.
Because fact of the matter is that American economy is doing far better than expected.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Better than most others.
Right.
Yet, the Americans are not convinced. They are very angry about the high cost of living and inflation, and therefore not willing to give any credit
Right.
to Biden for the handling of the economy. However, what can work in favor of Biden and goes against Trump. Number one, a lot of people will remind you about his personality,
Yes.
that he is who he is, the fact that he's seen as a very divisive figure. Many
Right.
have called him an insurrectionist. The Capitol Hill riots still haunt him.
Yep.
The multiple indictments against him, the criminal cases that he faces. Also, abortion rights are a very emotive issue in the US, and
Yes.
therefore most of those who are pushing for those rights would not want to see a Republican in the White House. And I think one big advantage that Biden also has is that between now and the election, which is still 8 months away, he has plenty of time to course correct.
Right.
If he's able to woo back some of the angry voters,
Yes.
let's say he takes a tougher stance on Israel, manages to secure a ceasefire in Gaza,
Right.
and manages to woo the fence sitters,
Right.
then, well, it could very well go his way. But I think at the moment, it would be safe to say it is anybody's election, Sandeep.
It's anybody's
It is expected
election,
to be a
indeed.
very close contest, one that either candidate could actually win by merely tens of thousands.
Tens of thousands, in
vote-
fact, as
votes.
narrow as it was 4 years back. And Irina, this, you know, we've heard for the longest time that it's the economy is stupid, right? Now, the US economy is firing on all cylinders, as Neha just mentioned, is growing at over 2.2%, and it's belied all expectations of a recession. It's come out strong, unemployment is at its lowest, inflation is down. But despite that, you have President Biden who's struggling. How are all these other factors going to impact on his presidential election in November? The facts that
Well,
Neha mentioned, you know, the Israel war that's going on against him, immigration, all the other factors except the economy.
well, actually, surprisingly, despite the fact that according to all the indicators, the economy is doing well, many people are still blaming Biden for previous issues during the course of his tenure. They're not giving him credit necessarily for the strong economy. Also, the inflation is still a factor, and many people are still angry over that. So I would not discount the economy as an issue affecting Biden, even though it should
Right.
be in his favor. Immigration, however, is the single biggest factor deciding this battle. It is, according to the polls, it's the strongest issue. It has become a #1 issue, and
Right.
for the voters since 2019, in over 5 years, and other indicators show that The number of people detained at the border is the highest possibly in history. It's gone up to 8 million people who are currently in detention, and that's aside from the rest who have been processed and awaiting assorted hearings across the country or have been deported. So we are seeing a huge influx of migration, and it's
Yes.
across the border, and that has become a bipartisan issue.
Right.
So on the one hand, Biden is suffering from the fact that overall he's perceived as to have been extremely weak on this issue, especially in the beginning of the term. Trump is running on this issue, but on the other hand, the Republicans have made a huge mistake, in my opinion. They have allowed Trump to try to essentially freeze the issue in Congress so that he could run on it come November after the official nominations process, and that's hurting them. That's hurting them because on the one hand they're saying we're dealing with a huge crisis and a catastrophe,
Right.
and that is true, by the way. On the other hand, they're refusing to do anything about it, and they're making the perfect the enemy of the good. They're refusing to support the bipartisan bill proposed by Senate or any other measures that were proposed earlier, which gives the Democrats, Biden, an opening to put a freeze on the border issues through an executive order. Not an ideal situation, but that is something that he may be willing to do. He has hesitated to do so
Right.
in order to not alienate more left-leaning voters, but this measure would allocate more resources towards essentially bringing deporting more people
Yes.
in en masse, and this is something that Trump is also promising to do. But Biden can do so immediately, whereas
Yes.
Trump has to wait until January of next year to
Right.
do that. So I think the voters are quite angry. The Israel war, or any foreign policy for that matter, is playing less of a role than what people may think, based on the noise coming from the progressive circles. Actually, in Michigan, where over 100,000 people voted non-committed, overall, the support for Biden went slightly up from 2020, which indicates that these people may not be much of a factor come November at all, and that's
Right.
even regarding the fact that
Absolutely.
Trump...
Irina, I'm going to
potentially
interrupt you
might-
for a minute. I'm going to bring in Ambassador Gupta here. Ambassador Gupta, how's New Delhi seeing these two candidates? It's a, as Neha said, it's for the Americans, it's a fight between the rock and a hard place, right? They're caught between a rock and a hard place. A candidate who's 71 years old and another one who's 81 years, 74 and 81.
76 and 81.
76 and 81. I stand corrected. Has New Delhi got the measure of both these candidates? We've seen 4 years of Trump. We've seen almost 4 years of Biden. Are we kind of complacent about we can handle whoever comes to Washington, or is there a fear factor that if another Trump presidency or another Biden presidency could, spell doom for the relationship?
Well, our foreign minister made a statement on this a few days back, which I think in essence captures where we are. And he said that as far as India is concerned, we have some sort of a bipartisan support in the US, both among the Republicans and Democrats. So as far as the India policy is concerned, I don't think we are worried too much in either case.
Right.
But in generally speaking, I would say that we would be more comfortable if Biden were to be re-elected, simply because this is not the time for the isolationists to win in the United States. The world doesn't need an isolationist America.
Absolutely.
The world needs an engaging America. The world needs an America which is able to push back China's aggression and hegemony in the region, which is able to push back the hegemony, the aggression and interventionist streaks, the abrupt behavior of countries like Iran and
Absolutely,
North Korea.
At a time when the world is at war. No, Ambassador Gupta, I get you.
So,
Unfortunately, we're completely out of time, but I must rephrase what you just said. It's like now is not an era for isolationism, to rephrase what the Prime Minister said. Now is not an era for war, now is not an era for isolationism. It's a very important takeaway that a Biden presidency could indeed benefit the world at large, especially when it's looking at multiple
And I
conflicts
want to make one more
a
point if you give me
rising
time.
China. Yes, Ambassador Gupta, very quickly, 30 seconds.
Yeah, very quick. The other point I want to make is I
Yes.
want to support what this lady from the United States said just now. That there was too much of anger against President Biden, which I think is dissipating now.
Yes.
And which could further dissipate as we move along in the coming 8 months. You know, a lot of people were angry with Biden on the policy towards Israel, on the issue of economy, on the issue of immigration. But these are again areas where I think there is scope for President Biden to make amends, where
Right.
President Biden can improve.
Absolutely.
his-
As Nehal said, he has 8 months. So it's 8 months is
And something
an eternity.
significant is
Yes.
happening tonight. Very quickly, Sandeep,
Yes.
I know you're out of time. President Biden is going to deliver the State of the Union address.
Absolutely.
And I can
That's-
tell you that it's going to be very closely watched.
Yes.
Every word, every gesture, every stutter of his is going to be picked on.
Across the
And it
world.
could.
Yes, the
It
world.
could very well set the stage for the upcoming election.
Absolutely. It could set the stage for the upcoming elections. Is it going to be Trump again? Is it going to be Biden again? New Delhi is going to be watching the presidential address by President Biden tonight very closely. Thanks to my panelists and my colleague Neha Khanna for joining us on the News 9 Plus show this evening. Thanks very much.
Streaming on News 9 Plus. News is now content. Subscribe and get free vouchers.